his father didn't bring him in, so evidently didn't think enough of him to bring him in and put him before Samuel. Wow. See, Troy, be glad you weren't number 8. You'd have just been left out in the field somewhere. But that's what I'm emphasizing. You look, David was out there. David was busy. David was taking care of business. He wasn't caught up in the ceremony of the day. Now, I don't want us to read too far into this, but I want us to understand that. So, considerations. Would David or his family ever picture him becoming king? Would that have been a thought? We get no picture in Scripture that anyone in that family, especially David, would have ever been chosen to be the king. They already had a king. Probably they knew that Samuel was separated from the king because they worried when Samuel came to town, do you come peaceably? You know, there was that friction that was there, and they knew that. But would they have thought that David would ultimately be the king in the land? Probably not. Probably figured Jonathan will be the next king and so forth like that. And if they even thought that maybe somebody in their family would be king, would they have thought it would be David? I don't think so. I don't think so. No sign of that. See, sometimes we don't see the possibilities that are out there. Sometimes we don't see them in ourselves. I don't think David ever thought about being the king. And even later when he has a little ego problems here and there and so forth, and when he wants to build the temple, and the Lord says, no, you're not going to build the temple. He says, Lord, you brought me out of the sheepfolds and everything. David was brought back to realize, Lord, you've taken me a lot further than I ever thought I would go in my life. I think if you stop and look at your life and where it is, you look at the people around you and the influences that you've got, you've probably come further in your life than you ever thought you would. Maybe it's not where you thought you would be, but you probably come further than you ever thought you would come in your life. But they probably never pictured him with the look of a king. David had not even considered, was not even considered to be at the feast, as you brought out, Larry. His elder brother had the look of a king, but God saw something in him. Keep in mind that passage in chapter 13 and verse 14. He was looking for a heart. He was looking for somebody that had the heart to be the king. Saul began, as you said, began very humbly, but somewhere along the line he got full of himself, and that happens. Sometimes people get into business and different kinds of business and get popularity and so forth, and before long, nobody wants to be around them. Egos just get to be so large and think, I'm really somebody. So, with that in mind, and David now going to be the king, God saw something in him that others were not seeing. He saw more than just a young, good-looking shepherd boy. So tell me, what are some of the qualities of being a good shepherd of sheep that translate into being a leader of people? I give you a hint. You're going to find a lot of them in Psalm 23. Humility. You know, and sometimes we have a wrong meaning on the word humility. Humility, some people think means shyness. No. Humility is determination, but for the cause. It's not selfish determination. It's determination for something better than yourself, bigger. Okay. Keeping Psalm 23 in mind, what qualities we see in the shepherd? The Lord is my shepherd, what? I will not want. The sheep are going to have what they need. It's going to be supplied to them. Shall not want. You make me to lie down in. He's going to give me good places to be in comfort. He leads me beside still or clear, good drinking water. Do you know sheep don't want to drink out of fast-flowing water? Shepherds will even pool water for the sheep, and carefully. And then when they can't do that, they would even hold it in their hands in ancient days for the sheep to drink right out of their hands. It provides still waters for the sheep to drink because sheep are kind of iffy in a lot of ways. Is that a good word to use? Anyway, you understand what I'm saying. and beside still waters. You what? Restore my soul. You make sure I'm doing well. You're concerned about my situation in life and make sure I'm healthy and doing well and good things are thought, and that's more in adulthood. What else?
Well, just that they're drinking from the hands, you've got to be trustworthy. I mean,
Okay, trustworthy.
you have to have some trust in you.
Okay, what happens when you're in a dark, scary place as well? No fear. I'm not afraid. I'll be with you wherever we stand. Though I pass through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. What else? Your rod and your staff. What in the world do rod and staff stand for? Strength and power, protection. Sometimes they had the crook-necked staffs that they could pull them back and so forth. But they also had rods that they would use to get rid of unwanted animals and so forth around the sheep. Your rod and their staff, they comfort me because I know you're there as my protector and so forth. That's right. The 10th chapter of John goes well with David. You're exactly right. What I'm trying to get to is you see these qualities. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies and so forth. Do you know that shepherds would actually go into fields and dig out and destroy the plants that were not good for the sheep to eat before the sheep would come in? Interesting. You know where I got that? Reader's Digest. Every so many years, they used to run an article, The Basque Shepherd and the Shepherd's Psalm. Of course, they won't run that anymore, but I used to have a copy of it. I lost it somewhere in one of the floods or fires or something along the way and all. But what I'm saying is, David, all the time he was a shepherd. While his brothers were in trying to get at the front of the line at the food and trying to stand up before Samuel, David is out working with the sheep. He's there among the sheep. When we think we're too big or too important, or we just think that's not something for me, we need to stop and realize it's all right to go get your feet dirty. It's all right to smell bad for a little while. And all. Some of you wish I would bathe more often. It's all right to get down in the midst of things. I heard a preacher here in town in one of the large congregations several years ago, and they were putting in a sprinkler system around the church building, for the lawn sprinkler system. And he said, had several men out there, younger men out there working. He said, and he was digging along, and he heard somebody turned around, and there was one of their oldest elders was out there with a shovel digging in that ditch. And he said, suddenly it dawned on me, it's whatever the job takes. It's all right to go out and get your feet muddy, to dig in the ditch, and be right down among what you might consider to be less than you ought to have to do. Unfortunately, I think sometimes we get that way, and not just one class of people in that regard, but we tend to get that way. So think about that, and I think when we look at that shepherd's psalm in Psalm 23, and of course, we can go to several other passages, and Jesus brings out, I am the good shepherd, as you point out, and all that, and we see something that in David, and you begin to grasp, God sees things that we don't necessarily see. When we are in some of the lowest points in our lives, may be one of the most important places for us to be. When we feel like somebody else is getting all the credit out here and we're not even getting any notice, maybe we're exactly where we need to be. When we stop worrying about getting noticed or credit or a job's doesn't fit for me, stop and think about David and getting down and dirty. We'll be Mike Rowe. We'll get down and do the dirty jobs, Get down there, go. I remember one of those, and he was in cleaning out some sort of big, filthy septic type tank and everything, spraying that thing down with steam and everything. And I thought, I'll be glad for him to do that. I really don't want to do that kind of thing. We lived second house down from a guy that pumped septic tanks for a living every day. And every day when he backed his truck up into the driveway, I thought, there's a lot of jobs I would do, but I'm not sure and I would do it if I had to, But that's not the job I really want in my life right now necessarily. So, you know, you never know. If you had a septic tank business, I didn't mean anything by it. I'm glad you were good at it. Somebody needed to do that job. But in all seriousness, that's there. I'll let somebody else do that. I think we look around and we say there are a lot of jobs we're glad somebody else does them. But I don't think we should come to the point and say, I won't do that job. David was in the field among the sheep when his brothers were getting the attention of the priest and judge. All right. So let's think about ourselves then. Excuse me. What about you? What about you? Now, we don't have to get real personal in this, but for the rest of our time, let's think about ourselves for a moment. What about you? Consider, where do you see yourself in the plan of God? I saw years ago, Little House on the Prairie. Anybody ever watched Little House on the Prairie? Come on, raise your hand and admit it. You watched it until it became such a soap opera you couldn't stand it anymore. There was one of the shows where the old preacher, wasn't it Dabbs Greer, I think, played the traveling preacher. Thank you, Roger. I'm glad somebody of our age could still remember.
Almost as old as you.
Almost. Dabbs Greer was sitting there talking to, and I don't remember who he was talking to, one of the girls or something in there. He said, you know, when he went to seminary, trained to be a preacher, and I don't know what exactly their denomination or something was, but when he trained to be a preacher, he had visions of the stained glass cathedrals and all of that. And then he got out and he started, and he found himself going to small towns. He found himself among the movement about from place to place, preaching out of schoolhouses and things like that. And he said, so for a long time I thought, okay, I'm going to move from here, I'm going to move up. And he said, and then one day it dawned on him. He said, here is my ministry. It's down here among these places, among these people, among the ones that may not be many, may not be remembered, but among these. I have friends who are preachers who think they ought to preach in the biggest places. I don't know. I'm just always happy to have one or two that would actually listen to what I had to say. Something. I got to tell you that my life has taken a course I never would have imagined it would have taken. Been places I didn't think we would be and so forth. Not because they're great, just because that's where we went. If you'd asked me that if I would be here at this point in my life in Oklahoma City 50 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. Absolutely not. I would not have moved to Oklahoma City for anything in the world at that time.
That's because you were raised in Tulsa.
That's right. We thought we were better than the rest over there. I don't know where you think you are, where you see yourself in the plan of God. What can you be? What can you do from where you are? I think sometimes we think, well, I can't do anything because of where I am. Why not? Why not? I think we stop looking for things to do. But I don't think David would have been unhappy if they'd have just left him out there with the sheep. I don't think he would have been unhappy. He's never been there. There are places in your life and my life we'll never go. You feel like you missed out because you never got to go there? How many in here have ever been to Blackwell, Texas? Okay, just south of Sweetwater, Texas, about 20 miles, Blackwell, Texas. Just south of Blackwell, Texas, about 5 miles, is a little lake, Oak Creek Lake. Sometimes it gets pretty dry. I spent a lot of childhood days down there. Some of the greatest adventures my cousins and I ever had in our lives were down there. You may never get to go there, but we had a blast. Have you missed out because you didn't get to be in the place I was? Not at all. You had your own, didn't you? That's exactly where. Take what you've got, where you are, use it for the best of your ability. That's what we learned in David. David was doing that. And what did it do? It opened a door for him. Okay, What skills have you learned that translate into God's work? Some of you are good at business, right? Pretty good at business. You can count numbers and so forth. You know when things are up and when things are down. We got people in here that have been classroom teachers for years, taught children for years. Not that you necessarily had to teach classes here, not it, but you bring with you an understanding and a concept of what it takes to organize and put something together and plan for those things to work. You know what I'm saying? There are, in this room, and I don't know how many of us are in here tonight, but there's such a variety of experience. And it's bringing that experience to bear wherever the opportunity may be. Just like David, he didn't know that his shepherding was going to lead him somewhere, but there it is, and it brings us to where we need to be. Where do you see yourself in the plan of God? But what skills are you learning or have you learned that translate into God's work? I think we need to ask ourselves that kind of thing. What have I learned that's going to translate into God's work? Well, I started to get onto the wax on, wax off, but I decided I'll leave that behind. But leave that image in your mind. As a Karate Kid, he didn't understand why Mr. Miyagi was making him wax on and wax off until it could be put to use. Sometimes we don't know what we're being fixed for in the days ahead. The struggles you've been through, illnesses, surgeries, losses, great benefits, all of those things can translate into very important aspects, okay? So think about the skills that you've learned in your life. How can I put these to use? Okay, finally, do we tend to stay with the sheep, whatever we are doing, or answer the call to service? There came a point, they said, David, come in. He couldn't stay with the sheep anymore. It was time to make a change. What was that book you made me read, Paula? Who Moved My Cheese? 80 pages long. Anybody else read Who Moved My Cheese? I keep wondering where in the world is. It's an interesting little book if you understand what it's trying to say to you. Sometimes we get so fixated on where we are that we're unwilling to step outside of where we are. But you got to say for David, he was ready to step outside. Next week, there are giants to slay. Not just one giant, there are giants to slay. So we'll come to that. But do we tend to just stay with the sheep? Where was Saul? They had to drag him out and get him out there. Saul was a good leader. He pulled the country together. He got the tribes working together. He got an army that worked. Saul did a lot of good things in preparation. Now, he got caught up in himself and turned against and failed God in so many ways. But do we tend to stay with the sheep? Whatever we are doing, say, well, this is important. Remember, we're not Nehemiah. Remember what Nehemiah said? I can't come down. I'm doing a great work up here. When they wanted him to come down and just sit and visit with them a while. No, don't leave just to visit with somebody. Don't leave just for anything. But when the importance comes up, respond to that call and that need. Do we tend to stay with the sheep, whatever we're doing, or to the call to service? Okay, so that leaves us with the final one. Did they hear me? Is that what they did? Okay. What are the primary lessons we learned from David being drawn from the field? What did we learn? What have we learned? What have we learned tonight? You got to be willing to answer the call. Very good. And he did. And they let Samuel anoint him, and it wasn't long before he was serving in a big way. And we'll come to more of that down the way. What else?
Make yourself valuable where you can.
Make yourself valuable where you can, whether it's out with the sheep or whether it comes in later and you're using some of those skills. Excellent. Very good. What else?
For the other people looking on, it isn't always
Okay, from the people looking on, it's not always the most obvious that is the best. Very good. Anything else? Have the heart. Whatever you do, do it with the heart. Let the Lord's will be your guide. Stay steadfast to the Lord. He wanted someone who was a man after his own heart. And we might translate that into character. After the character and the defining nature of God. Let that define you in whatever you're doing. Whether you're out there with the sheep or whether you're leading people, whatever it is, let the defining character of God be the guiding force in all that you do. Okay, that's the first lesson in this group. And I think it's important we understand where David was and what he became. That's the beginning point. The things that he learned out there were able to translate into what he became in a very powerful way. Any other thoughts you want to throw in? He was a king who lived in a cave, and he did. He did. And we're going to come to the point about of him actually hiding from Saul down the way. But it's he did not think so much of himself that he had to have his way in everything that he did. He even pretended to be crazy at one point. So maybe he was a little bit crazy. Okay? Anything else you want to throw in?
Well, one of the contrasts is when Saul is confronted with his defiance before God and his sin, he remains defiant till the end. Whereas when David is confronted by Nathan, he's remorseful.
Right.
He immediately turns back and recognizes how far he had strayed.
That tells a lot about that heart that we're talking about, doesn't it? That repentant, that remorseful heart, and the changes that he's willing to make. And he sees it as God's way, whatever. Very good. Very good. I saw another hand. Blue?
Well, the thought was, we'll see later that he is a volunteer in things that he does because he's defending the Lord. And you see that when he goes up against the
That's right. He's a volunteer, and he's there, and he attributes the best of it to the Lord. Okay, very good. Anything else stand out? Want to leave it? Yes, sir.
Do you think David was thinking that he's the smallest of his family and he's not worthy?
That's a good question. Do you think being the youngest, maybe, and he's not evidently a big, impressive man, that he felt like he was unworthy? I think there's a possibility in there. If he did, when it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, he became a much more determined individual, as we'll see when it comes to the slaying of the giants and so forth, and even as he deals with Saul with humility. There's going to be some good things I think we'll learn from that along the way. Okay. It's about time for the second bell, so I'll just let you go. Mine says 7:45, so the second bell should ring. Thank you for being here. I hope it's something that's beneficial to you and you enjoy it. Very good.